Hello, hi everyone. Welcome back to our Code Gavel series. This is episode 2, and I'm Harshitha from Code Gavel. And if you've already watched our episode 1, you already know Web3 is bigger than crypto and collectibles. And we've already discussed various types of companies and concepts in Web3. Today, we're taking it a step further, right? Exploring what Web3 is not and where the space is really growing and how Indian founders can be a part of it. As always, I have Pranjal sir here, who is the builder, breaker, to explain all things technical to us. Welcome, sir.
Hi, Harshitha. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to our to the Code Gavel series. Today we are cutting through the noise because, as Harshitha said, Web3 isn't just about tokens.
Mm-hmm.
It's infrastructure, right? It's decentralized data storage, verifiable computation, programmable trust. So let's zoom out a little and understand Web3 the way it's meant to be.
Yes. So, in our first segment, let's talk about how Web3 is misunderstood, right? So, let's start with a basic thing, very simple. So, what do you think are the most common ways people misunderstand Web3 today in terms of as a
Yeah,
technology?
so, right. It's a great question. I think firstly, I feel the biggest misconception is that Web3 is equal to crypto, right? It's like saying that internet is equal to email. I mean, crypto is just an application. It's the financial layer, but Web3 is more about decentralized protocols, peer-to-peer networks, smart contracts, right, which are programmable logic for interactions. Secondly, assuming it's only for techies or developers, but today there are multiple drag and drop NFT launchers, no code DAO tools, and even plug and play SDK wallet. Right, so you don't really need to write Solidity to participate. And thirdly, assuming it's dead, so the noise must have died down, but infrastructure is quietly evolving, and there are upgrades that are happening that will make Web3 apps feel like Web2 in UX, but with a lot of trust baked in.
Absolutely. I think that kind of answers the question. And to add to that, a lot of builders I've seen get hit with legal issues after the launch because they don't think that whatever they're doing is regulatable. But they have to keep in mind that whenever there is data, there's content, there's money, and there's a community building, everything has its own legal layers. So moving forward to understand Web3 models, as promised on episode 1, under the radar, what all the Web3 models that are there. Let's talk about a few of them. The first one being the on chain identity and credentials model. Okay, when we talk about identity, so what do you think? What is identity? And some people are working on wallets as your login, but what all does it include? It goes beyond that, right? How do you explain a wallet in the most basic way possible?
Right. So Web3 identity, I think it's all about self-sovereign verification, right? So think of it like instead of logging in with your Google or Facebook account, you log in with your wallet, right? And it holds all your information, your verifiable credentials, your badges, your spellbound tokens, and all of your achievements. So projects like Proof of Humanity use civil resistance mechanisms like social graphs, while Meta creates skill graphs linked to DAO contributions or open source GitHub commits, which are stored on the chain.
Okay, great. And guys, if you're storing anything tied to a person, think data privacy law. India's DPDP Act is here and it applies to wallets too if they're linked to users. So that's a very small legal tip that you have to keep in mind. Moving forward, let's talk about the second Web3 model where we're talking about Web3 commerce and loyalty. So what do you think about e-commerce? Are people doing real transactions on chain?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, there are platforms that help you tokenize loyalty, right? Help you replace SKU-based points with interoperable tokens, which you can use anywhere, right? So, for example, the Bharat Box, they're experimenting with tokens for royalty, right, and
Hmm.
enabling hybrid on-chain plus IRL perks, right? On the back end, smart contracts handle redemption logic, expiration, transferability, and all of that. And others use token gated commerce like issuing NFTs that act as subscription passes or
Hmm.
priority access for limited edition drops, right?
Hmm.
So think of it like a Spotify meets an unlock protocol.
Okay, that's cool. And being a lawyer by profession, I can think of various laws that this overlaps with, right? Like consumer laws, like GST, and even gift card has rules. So if you're issuing tokens with perks, you definitely need to consider defining redemption terms very, very clearly. Okay,
Right.
going ahead with the third model, let's talk about fan engagement and IP monetization. I mean, this one's close to my heart because it's about creators, and we do a lot of IP. How do you think the creators are using Web3 now?
So we are seeing musicians tokenize royalty rights, right? There are platforms like Royal and Sound which allow fans to own a share of the track's revenue. And then there are movie producers who are dropping NFTs tied to early access, behind the scenes content, or even
Hmm.
community voting on plot lines, right? So Zalo fans ties fan engagement to token incentives, and everything is tracked via smart contracts, right? And you must have heard of OpenSea, which is
Yeah.
still the main NFT marketplace. So, but use cases are evolving, right? It's not about art flips anymore. It's more about IP backed utility.
Okay, great. So again, a legal tip here is if you're dealing with songs, shows, or characters, anything related to intellectual property rights, it must be documented. Even if you're just dropping NFTs, without clarity, it can spiral into a lot of ownership disputes real soon. So IP is something that needs to be protected in spite of the entity being decentralized. Okay,
Definitely.
so let's go to the last model that we're discussing on this episode. Let's talk about governance. I know, might sound boring to most of them, but this is where DAOs and public protocols are quietly growing, right?
Right. So talking about DAOs. So DAOs are basically programmable organizations. So instead of a
Right.
central board, you have token weighted votes or voting via snapshot, right? Then there's Gitcoin, which supports public goods via funding rounds and quadratic matching using Sybil resistance to reward real communities. Right? And then there are Indian DAOs like Web3 Bharat, who are
Hmm.
experimenting with community-led grants and education incentives. So essentially, you can think of it like a governance as a service, which is like an API for decision making.
Right, very, very well explained. So this is where I have seen that most of the founders get exposed, right? If you have DAOs that has a treasury, people involved in decisions could become personally liable in those situations. So one pro tip, a pro legal tip is to wrap it in an entity. It could be a DAO LLC, it could be a foundation or even an hybrid LLP, depending on your requirement and structuring and all of that. But wrapping it in an entity is very important. So having said that, I want to quickly share a story of a real example of how things went wrong when legal was not taken seriously. So there was a music platform, right, that launched NFT passes that gave fans lifetime access to events. I mean, the idea is amazing, but unfortunately, they didn't put anything in writing. So, what do you think happened?
Let me guess, fans wanted refunds later.
Actually was. So artists started withdrawing and there was no clarity on the royalties, usage rights, or even expiry. So we had to step in and draft a proper NFT based licensing agreement. I mean, this was after the launch and after they went live. So it was very chaotic. And I honestly urge everybody to plan their legal structures just like how they plan their tech stacks. So it has to be before the launch and not after that.
Right, right. I think it's a classic case. NFTs were used as primitive access tokens, but without off-chain legal logic, right? The
Hmm.
smart contract post ownership, but not the business terms, right? So that's where token gating means licensing frameworks. You need metadata standards, off-chain enforcement mechanisms, and ideally a legal wrapper.
Exactly. So that's why we are here. If you're exploring Web3 as an industry, don't limit yourself to cryptos and collectibles. The real innovation right now is in identity, engagement, governance, and ownership. And
Right.
where do you think India is right now on that front?
Oh, I think India is perfect fit for it, right? I mean, we've got a top tier developer base which is already experimenting with protocols like Lens for social, Push for communication. Plus, with regulators actively exploring this space, I think it's a rare window to co-create policy with product.
Absolutely. On that line, having discussed all of this, I would like to say that in our next episode, we'll talk about how to choose the right legal structure for your Web3 startup. It could be any entity, it could be an LLP, it could be a DAO LLC, like I said, it could be a foundation, whatever suits you, whichever jurisdiction suits you, whatever model suits you. So, we're going to discuss in detail about all of that in the next episode.
Right. So subscribe, share, and if you've got a weird and wild Web3 idea, do write it in the comments and we'll reach out to you. We'll try to help you figure it out.
Absolutely. Thank you for tuning in. Subscribe, guys. See you soon.
Thank
Thank you, sir.